Today, we're going to explore the fascinating story of the Sand People, often called the Bushmen. These are the earliest inhabitants of the Southern Africa region. We're going to be looking back at their history through kind of a fascinating lens. We're going to start with their ancient origins and kind of trace it through time, all the way up to just before colonialism. So almost like a time lapse of this ancient culture, including incredible hunting skills and their rock art. It's a really captivating story. So let's start with the basics. How far back are we talking about when we say the Sand People were the earliest inhabitants? And how long have they actually been in southern Africa? Well, archaeological evidence suggests at least 20,000 years, which is incredible to think about. And some experts think it could even be longer, putting them in the late Stone Age. I know some pretty ancient tools were found in a place called the Border Cave, a discovery of a 42,000-year-old toolkit in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. What's even more fascinating is that these tools are remarkably similar to those used by the San in, more recent times. We're talking of an unbroken line of cultural knowledge being passed down for a millennia. It makes the San one of the oldest, and they've adapted and thrived in harsh environments, as we shall find out. The San were hunter-gatherers. There was another group in southern Africa, the Khoikhoi, whom we will talk about in the next episode. And I always get the two kind of mixed up, but they're distinct groups. They did share some similarities, quite a few, actually. Physically, they were quite similar, and their languages, although they were different languages, both incorporated those click sounds. Their lifestyles, though, were quite different. Whereas the San were purely hunter-gatherers, they relied completely on what nature provided. Let's talk about the San and their absolute mastery of the Kalahari Desert, because that's incredible. One may ask what their secret was. Well, they just lived in small nomadic bands. They were constantly on the move, getting food and water sources, and they had just the most incredible depth of knowledge about the desert itself. They weren't just like wandering aimlessly. They were following, ancient migration routes or seasonal changes. They knew which plants were edible, which ones had medicinal properties, and even which ones they could use for, um, let's just say, less benevolent purposes, or in simple English, poisonous plants. But it seems that they definitely knew how to utilize the desert's resources, let's say for protection. I can't say for certain why and even if they really used such plants. What do you think? Let us know in the comment section. The San are masters of their environment. They used every bit of that knowledge that was passed down through generations just to survive. That kind of deep understanding of the natural world and how to use it is one of a kind. How about hunting? They were legendary for their trekking skills. I mean, they were just incredible trekkers. Just imagine trekking prey for miles or kilometers across this arid landscape, sometimes relying on subtle signs like broken twigs or a faint footprint. Skills were honed over generations, skills that a modern day game ranger would use. Only that they are the original wilderness experts, reading the desert like a book. They use spears. Spears were part of it, but their weapon of choice was bow and arrow. And here's where it gets really interesting. Their arrows were tipped with poison. Yes, tipped with poison in a desert. But how? Well, they extracted it from beetle larvae, and this poison is called dampidia, and they'd harvest the poison from these beetles. It's a very delicate and maybe a little dangerous to be harvesting poison from a beetle. It was quite a process though, and the poison wasn't designed to kill instantly. It worked slowly. The hunters would have to track the wounded animal for hours, sometimes days, until it succumbed to the poison. Talk about patience and stamina. What's more, it wasn't just about the initial shot. It was this whole intricate process of strategy, skill, and just understanding of animal behavior. They would use ostrich eggshells as water containers. Very resourceful, if you ask me. Seems like recycling started many centuries ago. Then there are sip wells. These are like indigenous things that they would do during drought. When surface water was scarce, they would dig up these holes essentially in the sand to reach water that was trapped beneath the surface. Then they would use a hollow grass stem to suck the water up and collect it in. And if you're wondering what they would store the water in, you probably guessed it correct. Those ostrich eggshell containers. What an adaptation. Social structure is quite unique. The society was surprisingly egalitarian, especially considering how challenging the environment was. There were no formal chiefs or rigid hierarchies. Leadership emerged organically based on expertise. You can think of it like this: the best hunter might lead the hunting party. If somebody got sick, the most skilled healer would step forward. It was very practical and very fluid. They placed a strong emphasis on group consensus, so everyone had a voice in the decisions that impacted the community. No one person ruling with an iron fist.
Oh my God, bro.
Oh, hell no, man.
Everybody had a say. The women held a significant influence in the society. They weren't just gatherers, they were also healers, storytellers, and really respected decision makers. So they too had a vital role. Now let's talk about something that has always fascinated me and possibly a lot of other people: the sand rock art. I mean, it's legendary, it's world renowned, it's more than just beautiful imagery. It really gives us a window into their beliefs, their rituals, and their connection to nature. It's just phenomenal. They used natural pigments like oak. You get those earthy reds and yellows that we see a lot. And what kind of scenes were they depicting? Well, animals. Animals featured a lot, especially the eland. You may think it's because they were hunting them, but its presence in the art suggests that there was a much deeper meaning. Researchers believe that these paintings are depicting religious ceremonies, trance dances, even interactions with the spiritual world. So the eland was more than just, a food source for the San people. The San people also had significant events like trance dances. Picture rhythmic singing, clapping, dancing around the fire. And the shaman, who was the spiritual leader, enters into a trance state to connect with the spirit world and heal the sick. Spiritual healers will be guiding the San people through rituals and connecting with this unseen world. They believed that illnesses wasn't just physical, but they were also just spiritual. And so the shaman, through the trance dance, could actually diagnose what the spiritual root of the illness was and draw upon spiritual power to heal. One thing I've noticed in some of the rock art is that a lot of the figures bent over, like almost contorted. Those postures are thought to represent physical sensations that the shamans experience during those trance states. It's like that spiritual energy was just coursing through them so intensely that it actually contorted their bodies. This whole idea of the spiritual world, the trance, the eland, the vividness of the art, it really paints a picture of how important spirituality was to these people. It was woven in every aspect of their lives: hunting, social interactions, and of course, their art. You know, it's amazing to think about how long the San people were able to maintain their traditions and their way of life for thousands and thousands of years. We have to remember that as we move forward in time, the landscape of southern Africa was changing around them, like the arrival of other groups such as the Bantu speaking people who were migrating south. We, by the way, have an episode about this migration. So subscribe and hit the bell icon. It was a mixed kind of complex period of interaction and conflict. So, in some regions, particularly in the east, a lot of these activities were going on. San and these incoming Bantu people, they integrated, they intermarried, blending of cultures happened, and we can still see the evidence of that today, like in the click sounds that were adopted into maybe at least one official Bantu language spoken in South Africa. In other regions, like the western regions, the San and the Khoi, they resisted newcomers, and that led to conflict. It's a reminder that cultural exchange isn't always peaceful, especially when you've got the resources and land at stake. And unfortunately, that resistance also kind of painted them as adversities in the eyes of the expanding Dutch settlers, whom we will get into even much more comprehensive detail in the next season when we're done talking about pre-colonial South Africa. Their story doesn't end there. Like the San people are still around today, their culture, their legacy endures. They fought hard to retain their identity, their languages, their traditions, and it's really a testament to their strength and resilience. Speaking of identity, I know there's been discussion about the term San itself. Some consider it unifying, others find it problematic. It's a nuanced issue. The word San, originally, it was a derogatory term used by the Khoi. Even today, some San communities prefer to be identified by their specific group names. But this episode is about respecting their distinct history and not trying to impose a label on them. Now, this season specifically focuses on pre colonial South Africa, but if you want to know the situation for the San as it is currently, we can make a separate video on them. Do subscribe and let us know. Before we wrap this video into the San, I do want to touch on one more thing, their oral tradition. I know they have a fascinating mythology of these captivating stories and characters. It's so rich and insightful. Their myths, legends, and folk tales are not only entertaining but also really insightful. They give us a glimpse into their belief systems, their values, and their relationship with the natural world. One of the most prominent figures in the San mythology is Kagan, a trickster deity. What is a trickster deity, you may ask? He's a really complex character who embodies both wisdom and folly, helpfulness and mischief. He often appears as a mantis but can shape shift into other animals. He adds that layer of unpredictability like a trickster. But his stories are not just entertaining. They also teach important lessons about respect for nature, the consequences of greed, and the importance of balance. So their mythology isn't just about entertainment. It's about passing down cultural knowledge from one generation to the next. The stories serve as a repository for wisdom, a way to connect with the past. I just have a sense of admiration. What's most striking to me is just that enduring connection to nature. In a world where we often feel so disconnected from the natural world, the San's deep understanding and respect for their environment offers us all valuable lessons. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all sorts of things and the importance of balance, the wisdom that can be found in these ancient traditions. And let's not forget about their art. Those trickster tales like Kagan. I mean, it sounds like there's some profound wisdom hidden in there. One I always find really captivating is the story about Kagan creating the Milky Way, where he tosses embers from his campfire into the night sky, and they form that band of stars. So he literally brought light into darkness. It suggests that even in the darkest of times, there's always a spark of creation, a potential for illumination. And Kagan, through his act, reminds us that even from the simplest things, extraordinary beauty can emerge. The San understood that learning doesn't always have to be serious with tricksters, and tell that to your professors and teachers. They remind us of how important community is. I'm just left with a sense of greatness at their enduring spirit. There are just a lot of organizations working to support their efforts to protect their land, their language, and their traditions. And it's just that their story is a powerful reminder, and hopefully this one is too. Let's endure the connection between people and land. Until next time, subscribe.